A shock, a complete collapse at the worst possible moment, right when the Steelers had a chance to take control of the AFC North before the decisive showdown against the Baltimore Ravens. The 26-7 loss to the Buffalo Bills exposed every flaw that has haunted Pittsburgh throughout the season. This franchise isn't defined by its stumbles, it's defined by its responses, by its history of resilience, by the weight of the black and gold jersey, by the culture that turns pressure into fuel. And that's exactly what we're diving into in this video, where things fell apart, what it means for the team's current moment, and, most importantly, what needs to happen for the Steelers to rise when it matters most. And before we get started, smash the like button if you're black and gold until the end. From the opening possessions to the final whistle, nothing worked. The offense couldn't sustain a drive, couldn't stretch the field, and couldn't keep Aaron Rodgers upright or in rhythm. The defense couldn't get off the field, couldn't handle James Cook on the ground, and couldn't match the Bills' physicality as the game slipped further and further away. Buffalo held the ball for over 40 minutes. When an opponent eats 2/3 of the game clock in your home stadium, it usually means you got bullied on both sides of the ball, and that's exactly what happened. The second half felt like the lowest point of the season. On the very first play, the Steelers gave up a defensive touchdown, and everything that followed looked like a team completely drained of confidence and answers. What hurts most is how familiar this script feels. Once again, Pittsburgh jumped out to a first-half lead. Once again, they couldn't sustain it. Once again, the halftime adjustments from the coaching staff weren't just ineffective, they were non-existent. This has become a defining trait of Mike Tomlin's team this year: strong starts, weak finishes, and a pattern of being outplayed when it matters most. The injuries didn't help either. Patrick Queen left the game with a hip issue after another rough outing in a season where he leads the league in missed tackles. James Pierre exited with a concussion, forcing Asante Samuel Jr. into action in the second half. There's intrigue there. If he plays well, he may keep that job, but it's far from the kind of stability you want heading into the most important stretch of the year. And while Cole Holcomb and Peyton Wilson held their own filling in at linebacker, the unit as a whole still struggled with run fits, angles, and tackling, which allowed Cook to rack up 144 yards. But as much as fans might want to place the blame entirely on the defense, the offensive issues are even more alarming. Arthur Smith put together what might have been his worst game plan of the season. Against a team vulnerable against the run, he had a quarterback with a fractured wrist drop back repeatedly. Jaylen Warren averaged 3.5 yards per carry, not spectacular, but certainly serviceable in a game that demanded balance. Instead, the Steelers aired it out early and often, and the result was a flat, predictable offense that never challenged Buffalo's weaknesses. Aaron Rodgers, for his part, is clearly not himself. Since that electric Thursday night game against Cincinnati, he has not looked like a capable starter. Whether it's the wrist, age, or the system breaking down around him, his play has fallen firmly into bottom-tier starter territory. And while fans may clamor for Mason Rudolph or even Will Howard, Tomlin seems locked in. As long as the playoff race is alive, Rodgers is the guy. Whether that's loyalty or stubbornness is up for debate, but what's undeniable is that Pittsburgh's season hinges on a quarterback who hasn't looked right in more than a month. The run defense is perhaps the most frightening issue moving forward. If this unit couldn't stop James Cook, how are they supposed to handle Derrick Henry? Not once, but twice, over the next 5 weeks. And after that, Devin Achane? Then Detroit's physical backs? Every contender remaining on the schedule brings a punishing ground game, and unless something changes dramatically, it's hard to imagine this defense holding up. They've had flashes, shutting down Jonathan Taylor and Josh Jacobs earlier in the year, but the trend line is pointed in the wrong direction. The big picture frustration comes from the fact that despite all of this inconsistency, the Steelers remain tied for first in the AFC North. Everything is still in front of them, mathematically speaking. But emotionally, mentally, you can feel the fan base starting to slip into resignation. It feels like the wheels are wobbling, if not already falling off. And yet, if there's one thing we've learned about Mike Tomlin teams, it's that they sometimes find their stride precisely when everyone is ready to bury them. Maybe this is their rock bottom, the moment that forces accountability and course correction. Or maybe it's a sign of what's coming. So here's the real question for Steelers fans as we look ahead to Ravens week with everything still technically on the line. After watching this collapse against the Bills, do you still believe this team can turn it around? Picking up exactly where we left off, the question now becomes not just whether Steelers fans believe this team can turn things around, but whether the team itself has shown any tangible evidence that such a turnaround is even realistic. Because as we shift our focus to Baltimore, the truth is unavoidable. The margin for error has vanished. Every weakness exposed against Buffalo is the exact weakness the Ravens are built to exploit. And that's why the conversation this week feels different. It's not reactionary. It's not emotional. It's rooted in what we've watched over the past 7 games. This team began the year 4-1, controlling games with physical defense, a steady run game, and just enough from Aaron Rodgers to keep pressure off the rest of the roster. Since then, they've gone 2-5, and the decline hasn't been subtle. Teams have figured out how to wear down this defense, how to force Pittsburgh into unfavorable downs, and how to exploit a lack of explosive plays on offense. The second half collapses, the lopsided time of possession battles, the questionable in-game adjustments, they've all become patterns rather than isolated issues. And now, with 2 meetings against the Ravens looming and the AFC North hinging on those very matchups, everything this team has failed to fix is crashing into them head-on. Baltimore doesn't just run the football well, they commit to it for 4 quarters. They don't just play physical defense, they smother you early and force you to chase the game. Derrick Henry alone presents a problem Pittsburgh hasn't solved in 2 years, and nothing from the Bills game suggested that's about to change. When James Cook gets 144 yards on efficient, uncontested runs, Henry becomes a nightmare scenario. This is why the coaching concerns have grown louder. Mike Tomlin's defenses historically bend before they break late in the year, and that pattern has repeated itself again. The overextended snaps, the inability to force punts in the second half, the missed tackles, the exhausted front seven, it's all familiar, and fans aren't wrong to wonder how this keeps happening. Is it conditioning, scheme, personnel, or simply fatigue from being on the field for 40 minutes every week because the offense can't sustain drives? Speaking of the offense, Arthur Smith is reaching a crossroads. His insistence on throwing the ball with a quarterback who has a fractured wrist in 3 places raised eyebrows everywhere. And when that quarterback isn't producing, isn't mobile, and isn't creating off-script, forcing the passing game only makes everything else collapse faster. This was supposed to be a run-heavy offense built on Warren, Gainwell, and a physical line. But against a defense weak against the run, the Steelers lined up and played directly into Buffalo's strength. That's a coaching failure, plain and simple. And yet, as frustrating as this is, the season is not lost. The AFC North is still within reach. Pittsburgh plays the Ravens twice. They hold every opportunity to rewrite the narrative, but narratives are rewritten with performance, not hope. If Rodgers can't regain his early season form, even just a functional version of it, this offense will continue to sputter. If the defense keeps giving up long stretches of possession, they'll continue to run out of gas. If the coaching staff can't adjust in real time, the same mistakes will keep playing out. The fans feel this tension, the players feel it, and the pressure has shifted from expectation to survival. Everything in the coming weeks hinges on whether this team can break the patterns that have defined them since mid-season. We've seen Tomlin teams do it before, rallying from the brink with gritty, improbable wins. But we've also seen the opposite, late-season collapses that erase early promise. Which version will show up now? That's the real story unfolding, and it's what makes this moment so critical. So I want to hear it straight from you. After everything you've watched, the collapse against Buffalo, the injuries, the quarterback struggles, the coaching questions, do you honestly believe the Steelers can handle the Ravens in these crucial upcoming matchups? Then let's take this all the way to the heart of the issue, because the truth is that everything about the Steelers season now comes down to identity. What is this team actually built to be? What do they lean on when their backs are against the wall? Because right now, they look like a team searching for answers in places that used to come naturally. This defense once thrived on chaos, forcing turnovers, creating short fields, dictating the tone at the line of scrimmage. But as the season has stretched on, that identity has faded under the weight of excessive snap counts, inconsistent tackling, and a lack of complementary football from the offense. You can see the exhaustion in the second half of games. The first half against Buffalo was a reminder of what this unit can be when fresh, aggressive, disruptive, sharp in pursuit. But it lasted all of 30 minutes before the floodgates opened. That's not on talent. That's on structure. A defense cannot survive playing 40 minutes a week. Not in today's NFL. Not against elite offenses. Not against elite running backs. And certainly not against Baltimore, who thrives specifically on wearing teams down with heavy personnel and relentless ground and pound football that forces linebackers and safeties to tackle big-bodied runners over and over again. If James Cook exposed the seams, Derrick Henry will tear them wide open unless something drastically changes. On offense, the identity crisis is even more glaring. Arthur Smith was hired to stabilize things with an attack built on balance, physicality, and play-action efficiency. Instead, the offense feels disjointed and uncertain. The run game, which should be the foundation, disappears for long stretches. The passing game lacks explosive elements. Drives stall because of predictable play sequencing, lack of rhythm, or Rodgers simply not having the mobility or accuracy he once did. And that's the other unavoidable conversation, Aaron Rodgers. This season was built on the idea that Rodgers would bring stability and playmaking to an offense desperately needing both. But since the wrist injury, since that Bengals game, he's been a shadow of what the team needs him to be. Whether it's pain, mechanical issues, hesitation, or simply age catching up, the version of Rodgers we've seen over the past month hasn't been good enough to elevate this roster. And if he's not elevating it, he's dragging it down, because the offense is built entirely around him succeeding. Fans calling for Will Howard aren't crazy. They're desperate for a spark. But Tomlin made it clear, until the playoff path is mathematically dead, Rodgers is the starter, which means the fate of this team is tied directly to whether he can stabilize his play, even if the ceiling never returns to what it was. They don't need Rodgers to be an MVP. They need him to be functional, efficient, and smart with the football. Right now, he's not checking enough of those boxes. The Ravens don't care about any of that. They see a wounded team limping into a crucial game. They see a defense that loses steam, an offense that can't generate explosive plays, and a coaching staff scrambling for answers. Baltimore has no intention of giving the Steelers room to breathe. They want to bury them, quickly and emphatically. And that's why this moment is so defining. This isn't just about winning a football game. It's about proving that this team still has fight, still has identity, still has enough leadership and talent to pull itself out of a nosedive. Sometimes the season hinges on one emotional response, that moment where a team says enough is enough. We saw a glimpse of that earlier in the year when they rallied after early struggles. But this time, the mountain is steeper, the weakness is more exposed, and the opponent far more prepared. Is there still a path? Yes. It's narrow, it's demanding, and it will require something we haven't seen consistently this season: resilience in all four quarters, creativity from the coaching staff, and leadership that translates into real, tangible performance on the field. So here's the final question I'll leave you with as we wrap up this second part of the story and put this moment into full perspective. As the Steelers prepare for the most important stretch of their season, are you ready to ride with them, and do you believe they can dig deep enough to fight their way back into the postseason battle? If you're locked in for every twist, every hit, every snap of this roller coaster, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, smash that like button, and stick around, because the next video is already on the screen, and we're breaking down exactly what Pittsburgh must fix before kickoff against Baltimore. And if we're being honest, the conversation can't end without digging into what this stretch will mean for the future of the franchise. Because while the focus is rightly on the next game, the implications of how the Steelers finish this season will echo far beyond these next 5 weeks. Mike Tomlin is at the center of that discussion. For nearly 2 decades, he has carried a reputation for resilience, for never having a losing season, for rallying teams that had no business staying afloat. But this is the first time in years where you can feel a real shift in how fans view his leadership. The repeated late-season collapses, the predictable patterns, the halftime adjustment issues, they're no longer isolated criticisms. They're forming a resume of problems that can't be ignored. This isn't about Tomlin being a bad coach. It's about whether the voice that once sparked momentum now struggles to break old habits. And if the Steelers stumble through the next few weeks, those conversations about trading him in the offseason aren't going away. In fact, they will get louder, much louder. The front office also has decisions looming. Quarterback, offensive identity, defensive sustainability. This isn't a roster without talent. Far from it. There are young pieces worth building around. Peyton Wilson looks like a cornerstone. Jaylen Warren is a spark plug. George Pickens, when properly used, can be a force. But the structure around them must be right. The coaching must evolve. The quarterback position must have a long-term plan, not a yearly patch. And the run defense must be rebuilt with the same physicality Pittsburgh once used to intimidate opponents. All of this hangs in the balance of how the Steelers respond right now. Teams reveal who they truly are when everything goes wrong, not when everything is going right. And for all the frustration, this locker room still has leaders, still has veterans who care, still has enough talent to compete if they can play to their strengths instead of running from them. The Ravens game will tell us everything, not just about the Steelers' playoff hopes, but about their heart, their pride, and whether this season is salvageable in any meaningful way. A win doesn't magically fix the issues, but it proves there's still fight in this team. A loss, especially an ugly one, could accelerate a franchise-wide reckoning. And that's why this moment feels so heavy, because it's not just a game anymore. It's a crossroads. If you've made it this far, you're clearly a fan who's riding through the highs and the lows. So before you jump to the next video on the channel breaking down the Ravens matchup in full detail, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let YouTube know Steelers Nation is still alive and locked in. The next breakdown is already on your screen. Click it now and let's keep pushing through this stretch together, one snap at a time. If we're taking this one step further, still grounded entirely in the material from your file, then the only direction left is to deepen the reflection on what this stretch truly represents for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because everything in that post-Bills breakdown points to a team standing right on the edge of a defining moment. And if you really sit with what was said in that original evaluation, you realize it wasn't just a reaction to a bad game. It was a diagnosis of trends that have been building all season long. The most striking part of that analysis is how clearly it frames the collapse as something bigger than execution. This wasn't just about missed tackles, blown assignments, or Rodgers struggling with accuracy. It was about patterns, the kind that reveal who a team is at its core. For blown first-half leads, a defense that looks sharp for 2 quarters and then completely empties the tank because the offense can't sustain drives, a coaching staff that repeatedly calls game plans that don't match the opponent's weaknesses, and a quarterback situation that no longer inspires confidence, even from the most optimistic parts of the fan base. What the file exposes is a team caught in the middle between what it used to be, what it wants to be, and what it actually is right now, and that tension is pulling every part of the organization in a different direction. You can sense the frustration in the tone, that feeling of déjà vu, of another year where the defense enters December exhausted, where the offense refuses to evolve, where opportunities slip away because the team cannot stop the run or create explosive plays. It's not a crisis built on one Sunday. It's a crisis built on years of the same issues resurfacing when the stakes get highest. And now, everything funnels into the Ravens. Not just because they're the division rival, not just because they're tied at the top of the AFC North, but because Baltimore is the exact stylistic nightmare for this version of Pittsburgh: physical, efficient, relentless in the run game, and disciplined in ways the Steelers have not been. This is the moment where leadership matters more than talent, where a locker room either tightens or fractures, where coaches either adapt or double down, where veterans either elevate the standard or accept the slide. And all of that will be visible, brutally visible, the moment the ball is kicked off. That's why this isn't just another late-season storyline. It's a referendum on the direction of the franchise, on whether Tomlin can still steer the ship when everything wobbles, on whether Rodgers can momentarily rediscover competence despite the wrist injury, on whether Arthur Smith can swallow pride and commit to the run, on whether the defense can dig deep enough to play above exhaustion and circumstance, on whether the players truly believe they can still win the division, or whether the doubt that showed up against Buffalo has taken root. This next stretch won't just determine playoff seeding. It will determine who stays, who goes, who gets trusted, and who gets reevaluated. It will shape the 2026 offseason. It will shape the quarterback plan. It will shape the coaching staff. It may even shape the future of the Tomlin era itself. And now the question shifts from what the Steelers should be to what they're willing to become. That's what makes these final weeks more than football. It's the identity test every team eventually faces. That's why this isn't just another late-season storyline. It's a referendum on the direction of the franchise, on whether Tomlin can still steer the ship when everything wobbles, on whether Rodgers can momentarily rediscover competence despite